My name's Emily, I'm 30 years old, and I have ADHD. This video today is all about my experiences with teaching and being a teacher, and also how my undiagnosed ADHD impacted on that, and also why I eventually left teaching because I couldn't cope. And because my ADHD was undiagnosed, it meant that I didn't have the right support that I needed, either from myself, friends and family, or in the workplace itself. Before I get into the video, I just want to say I set up a Buy Me a Coffee page. If you enjoy my content and you want to support me, it would be so great if you headed over to that page and just put in a little donation to support me so that I can keep making these videos for you. If you haven't got the money to spare, like, subscribe, all of that nonsense, that really helps too. Thank you. I really appreciate it. So I was a secondary school English teacher in England for 4 whole academic years. I taught 11-year-olds through to 18, and I taught English language and English literature. And those 2 topics are my life passions. It was such an honour to spend time with young people being passionate about something I loved so much. And I think it's really important to say before I get into the meaty bit of this video that nothing in this video is pointing a finger at anybody I used to work with or my old workplace itself. Teaching is a really, really hard career, and when you have undiagnosed ADHD, I think that makes it harder. So a lot of this is just because of the system itself, and also to do with the fact that I had undiagnosed ADHD, and that made it really hard for anyone to understand how to support me, including me supporting me. I also want to say that working 12-hour days, 70-hour weeks is normal in a lot of people's cultures and a lot of people's lives. And at no point do I want anyone to think that I think I'm special or exceptional for doing that kind of work. Ultimately, I'm just not cut out for that. There are plenty of people in the world who thrive in those environments and enjoy working hard on something they're passionate about for long periods of time. However, I'm not one of those, and if you are one of those people, I'm secretly a little bit jealous of you because I wish I could do it, and I can. I'm going to assume that a lot of people watching this video are teachers themselves or ex-teachers. However, I also think that there will be lots of people perhaps watching this who aren't. I think it's important to give you an idea of the kind of workload that teachers take on in the role. Originally, I was going to sit and list these, but I tried to record that just now and it took so long that I just think it's better if I just put a list here. And you can just read through it at your own pace. You will see that teaching goes so far beyond just the lessons that you teach, in the sense that you're not just standing up in front of a class and teaching them. There is so much going on behind the scenes, and a lot of that doesn't really get seen. It's not even recognised by people who don't teach. So I just wanted to perhaps open your eyes if you wonder what I was doing while I was struggling and why I was struggling so much. I'm also going to say that the pay for teachers is so terrible, so it's not even like you're doing this job for an amazing payout. I think generally it's quite well known that teachers don't get paid very well. But to put that in context, when I was training to be a teacher, I actually was teaching full-time as well as training, because I did a very particular training scheme called Teach First, which I actually loved. But it turns out I did a little bit of maths, and I was actually getting paid about £6.77 per hour that I worked. And to contextualise that, in the UK, minimum wage is £10.42. So yeah, I wasn't exactly getting paid a lot when I was going through some quite traumatic stuff. So I thought I would just run through kind of what my working day would look like and how I would get through it. And I'll do Monday to Friday, and then I'll talk about kind of free time as well. So every day when I was in the classroom, my alarm would go off at 5:30 in the morning. I would spend about an hour getting ready. If I remember, I would have breakfast, but quite often I wouldn't have breakfast. I would feel really sick in the mornings, like I would have like a knot in my stomach and I'd feel really nauseous, and retrospectively that was because I was just struggling with anxiety. From the moment my alarm went off, I felt anxious. I would leave the house at 6:30 a.m. and drive to work. If I didn't leave by 6:30, I would get stuck in traffic, and if I got stuck in traffic, I would probably be late because my commute was between half an hour and an hour. So I would aim to get to work for 7:30 a.m. at the absolute latest. From 7:30 till 9 a.m. I would be preparing for the work day, and quite often this would be quite a hectic, stressful time. So I would use that time to prepare resources like photocopying, and quite often I would go to the photocopier and there would be a queue because everyone was doing the same thing, and we had one photocopier for 2,000 students. Like, funding cuts. I would also use that time for lesson planning. I would sometimes have meetings. I think the earliest meeting I ever had as a teacher was at 7 a.m. I had a meeting, and it wasn't a remote meeting, it was there in the office. But quite often we would have meetings, and especially when you're in a school environment, there is this like constant feeling of rushing around because you have a bell that goes off at a particular time and you have got to be in a certain place at a certain time when that bell goes off. So the meetings that you would have sometimes would be really like overwhelming. At least I found them overwhelming. ADHD. Then the teaching day would begin, and that would be 9 a.m. till 4 p.m. And in that time, I would teach between 4 and 6 lessons, depending on my timetable that day. There would be an hour's worth of break within that, so 20 minutes in the morning and 40 minutes in the afternoon. But I would say those breaks are for the kids. The entire time I was teaching for 4 years, I never had a hot drink. I never had a cup of tea, I never had a cup of coffee. I didn't have time to wait for the kettle to boil. Quite often on break times, I might have to be on break duty, so that's 20 minutes of standing around outside in the rain, because it's the UK. And at lunchtime, usually I would be running revision sessions, and I might like shovel in some food, but it wouldn't be nutritious food, like maybe a cereal bar. Quite often I just wouldn't eat any lunch, and it would get to 4 p.m. and I wouldn't have eaten anything. The same goes for drinking water. I actually got into a headspace where I didn't drink water during the day because I didn't have time to go to the toilet. I mean, like retrospectively, horrific, but at the time felt totally okay and normal. We would finish school around 4 p.m. and I used to leave at 4. Basically, as soon as the kids had gone and I was able to leave, I would leave. That is saying, unless I had a meeting or staff training or parents' evening or any of the other things that go on after school clubs, I ran those. But on a normal day, I would just go home. And the reason I would leave at 4 p.m. is because I wanted to beat the traffic. And also, by this point, I was so tired. I was exhausted. I did not have an ounce of energy left. I would drive home. I would get home about 5 p.m. and I'm not kidding, I would get in through the door, I would lie down on my bed and I would sleep like straight away for 2 hours. Following that, I'd wake up, I'd cook dinner. Quite often I was the person in my house who did the cooking and also the cleaning. And then I would eat probably my first meal of the day around 7:30 p.m. And then I would grab my laptop and I would sit down, usually in front of a TV show that I was like half watching. And I'd probably work till about 11 p.m. And then I'd go to bed and I would fall asleep again, like instantly, because I was exhausted. And then the whole thing starts over again the next day. I found it really hard. It would get to the weekend and you'd think she needs a break. And you're right, she did need a break. I would usually spend the Saturday either sleeping or just feeling absolutely drained. I didn't have a social life because even on the days that I didn't do any work, I just needed time to decompress and be on my own and just try to find the energy and motivation to keep going. And usually that would be on a Saturday, and then on a Sunday I'd spend the whole day working. Usually a Sunday was marking day and I'd have piles and piles of student books that I needed to plough through and mark. And that would be like 8 hours on a Sunday just doing that. So in total, I think I was working like between 60 and 70 hours a week, depending on the week. And like I said at the start, some people, that's fine. For me, was not the one. And before you say it, I know that teachers get a lot of holiday, but I was so stressed during term time that when it came to holidays, it didn't feel like a holiday. It felt like I should be being taken to a hospital. I was so exhausted. Really often I'd be ill, or I would have been not acknowledging that I was ill during term time, and then it would get to holiday and I would just be unwell because I let it finally happen. Gave my body the time it needed to recover. Obviously, revision sessions in holidays, you would have planning for the term ahead, marking, always marking on holidays. I think a prime example of that is when I went away with my friends to a beautiful cabin in the forest, and I think it was New Year's Eve, and all of my friends were outside. They were in the hot tub, it was snowing, it was in this beautiful forest, it was idyllic, and I was sat inside at the kitchen table marking all day, and that made me really sad. But I had to do it because if I didn't, I was letting the kids down and I would have got in trouble. All of this is to say, it wasn't a great environment for me. I was really, really struggling. Even putting in 70 hours a week, I didn't get everything I needed to do done. Retrospectively, I think that was because I had undiagnosed ADHD. I didn't know what I was doing. I was totally out of my depth. And this ultimately led to quite a lot of physical effects as well as mental health effects. So I'll just explain a few of the physical effects that I actually saw as a result of teaching with undiagnosed ADHD. I suffer with migraines, and a massive trigger for me is not eating, not drinking enough, but stress. If I am stressed, my brain sabotages me and will send down a massive aura. I can't see anything, my eyes stop working, and I get a debilitating headache. And I remember telling this kid off and thinking, I can't see your face, because my eyes were just fuzzy because the stress had almost come down and clouded my vision. Yes, that wasn't ideal. I got really bad eczema. Again, I think obviously that was stress. I remember my hands were just covered in eczema. I also had a really interesting symptom that I only really started to understand after I left and didn't have this symptom anymore, was I would get really, really terrible backache, particularly on my right side in my shoulder. And what would happen would be I wouldn't notice it all day. And then when I was driving home in the car, I would feel this really, really bad pain in my shoulder. And I realised it's because when I was driving home, I was relaxing All the tension that I'd been holding in my body all day because I was feeling really anxious and stressed was just being released, and that meant that the muscles just started like screaming at me. I suffered panic attacks while I was teaching, usually not in lesson. I think I was really lucky that I think in lesson there was something going on where I switched into teacher mode and I really wanted to be there for the kids, but some days I would just have a panic attack, and even things like in the morning, it would be 6:30 a.m, I'd be getting in my car and I would have a panic attack. I would really struggle to breathe. I would feel like pins and needles in my hands, my feet, just an overwhelming sense of dread. But, and I don't know how I did this, I would still drive to work. During this time, I wouldn't say underweight, but I was definitely on the lower end of a healthy weight. And that was because I wasn't eating properly, as mentioned. And obviously, I was exhausted. My sleep was quite often disturbed overnight because I was stressed and anxious about the next day. By the end of the school day, I would go and have that nap because my brain was just drained. It was gone. If we talk about the mental health effects, ultimately, I was obviously stressed, but there was also this anxiety that really set in. I was just in a constant state of fight or flight. I was on the edge, just tense and ready to go all the time because I was so anxious. I think part of having ADHD is that kind of feeling like a failure, and I was struggling so much that ultimately I started, it's really hard to say, I started having suicidal ideations. I would drive to work and I would think about pulling into oncoming traffic on the motorway just so that I didn't have to go and I could stop this cycle that I was in. I would perform harmful activities on myself, particularly like skin picking and hair pulling. They were kind of the two that I really have historically struggled with. And ultimately, I was depressed, and both as a symptom of depression, but also as a consequence of my depression, I was just totally socially withdrawn. I would not have the energy or the interest in socializing with my friends. And I stopped doing hobbies that I enjoyed. Like, I was an English teacher and I didn't even read books for fun anymore because I just didn't have the energy to do that. I think one of the hardest things about having ADHD and struggling with all this stuff, I genuinely don't think I was a bad teacher. I actually think I was a really good teacher. It's just that behind the scenes, I really, really struggled. Like, an example would be, I had a class that I loved teaching. I really, really enjoyed teaching them. And towards the end of my teaching career, I had to take a lot of time off sick because I was just so unwell. And I remember going into my lesson and the kids hadn't seen me for a while, and I apologized. I said, I'm really sorry I haven't been here. You know, I've wanted to be here, but I've been unwell. And I really hope that that hasn't damaged our student-teacher relationship. And I remember a kid saying to me that when I was in the classroom, I was the best teacher she'd ever had. And she was just sad because she missed me. Sorry, I'm upset now. She was sad because she wasn't getting that education that she knew I could give her. When I was training, I had amazing feedback. I actually got outstanding on everything when I passed my teacher training, and I would often get really great feedback about how creative my lessons were and how original they were and how engaging they were. And I think a lot of my ideas actually came from having ADHD. I'm a very creative person. My ADHD also meant that I was really empathetic with students, which was a bit of a double-edged sword, because I would spend time getting to know the kids, and often they would share emotional information and stories with me. And as great as that is, you have to remember that I'd be going home and taking a lot of that emotion with me because of the high level of empathy that I felt. And that was obviously going to create mental health problems for me as well. Being a teacher in my favourite subject was also great in the sense that I could hyper-focus on a subject that I'm really passionate about. But I think it also meant that I was so focused on that one thing that I ultimately struggled to do anything else. It took over my life, and that is dangerous. So thankfully, after 4 years, I left teaching, and short-term effect of quitting was this immense feeling of relief. I walked out of the school on my last day and I felt like I had been reborn. Everything that had been going on before, it felt like it had just disappeared and I was free. However, that feeling didn't necessarily last. I think medium term, so, you know, sort of like 2 months to 6 months, maybe even up to a year afterwards, there was a lot of guilt that I felt, and I think I still feel that now, but at least I can recognise it. As I said, I think I was a good teacher, and I felt really terrible that I couldn't deliver what those kids needed and that I have the potential to give them, but just couldn't physically, mentally do. And I felt like I was robbing them of something, which sounds really big-headed, but also, like I said, I don't think I was a bad teacher. I felt totally lost. I didn't know what I was doing with my life. I really, really struggled to find meaning and know who I was without having that career in my life. And ultimately, it was just a massive feeling of failure. I really beat myself up about why couldn't I do it? I'd look at other people who were teachers and I'd think, how do you do this? How are you finding this so easy? Is there something wrong with me? And I think I felt like that until I got my ADHD diagnosis. Getting diagnosed with ADHD made me realise that I was operating in an environment, in a career that really pushed me to the edge of my capabilities. And I'm really proud that I did 4 years because it was hard. I'm also really proud that I quit, and I knew that I needed to. And I made positive changes in my life. Getting my ADHD diagnosis gave me something to blame other than myself for being what I thought of as a failure. And now I can look back and, yes, be proud of myself, but also take all of the things I learnt about myself and also the skills and knowledge that I gained to actually have a career that is successful and is rewarding and is also fit for me and my life and what I need from a job and what I don't need. So I guess all of this is to say that if you are somebody who suspects that they might have ADHD and is really struggling with their workload, or perhaps you're a teacher who is wondering why they are finding it so hard, it's not your fault. The system is designed for neurotypical people. It is not an accessible system for people who are neurodivergent. Similarly, if you're a teacher and you're struggling and you don't have ADHD, it is still really hard. And if you're struggling, tell somebody, but also know that you are not the only person that finds teaching hard. It is solid. And if you're a teacher, I have mad respect for you. Like, it blows my mind. I think teachers are amazing. I actually think you're kind of superhuman. I'm not sure how you do it. Maybe you're robots, but I love that we have fantastic teachers who work hard and put in the energy and effort that they do. You deserve to be paid so much more, and you deserve to be respected so much more. Thank you for doing what you do. Maybe one day I will come back to teaching, but right now I'm focusing on myself and I'm getting better. And also, I have a career now that I love, which I will talk about maybe in another video, so you should come back. As I said at the start, please like, please subscribe, and if you want, buy me a coffee. Link is in the description. Thank you for watching. I really hope this video was informative, helpful, and hopefully not too sad. Tried to be uplifting at the end. We'll see. Thank you for watching. Take care, and I will see you soon. Bye!